I am Congressman Ron Paul. I've been elected to the Congress 12 times from Texas. Before I went into the Congress, I delivered babies for a living and delivered 4,000 babies. Now I would like to be known and defend the title that I am the champion of liberty, and I defend the Constitution. Thank you.
A lot of major problems in this country, but you know what? There's a revolution going on in this country today. It's a very healthy revolution. It's been going on especially for the last 4 or 5 years, and it has been designed to deal with the problems that we have, because we have drifted far too away from our Constitution, our individual liberties, a sensible foreign policy, and the American people are not only tired of it, they're sick of paying for it because we're out of money and we have to do something about it. But I see the crisis that we're in basically as an attack on liberty. Personal liberty solves a lot of problems. That's what our country was all about. The founders understood this. They detested the king. The king was abusive with the military, detested the taxes, they detested the abuse of civil liberties. So they knew and understand exactly what liberty meant. That meant that people had a right to their life. They had a right to their liberty, and it didn't come from the government. It came from our Creator. And they also believed that you had the right to keep the fruits of your labor. They did not give us an income tax, and that was a precise reason we got that income tax later on. The 20th century was not kind to us, was not kind to our financial situation, our debt, our foreign policy, our monetary policy. You know, 1913 was a bad year. It was sort of unlucky. It was 1913 we got, the income tax, which was just encouraging the spending. But we also got another bureau that became very detrimental, and someday we're going to get rid of it, and that is the Federal Reserve System of 1913. Now, the reason the Federal Reserve is so important, and one of the major reasons I got involved in politics many years back, was in 1971, we severed all linkage of our money to gold, which meant that the founders' ideas were rejected. The founders understood something about the runaway for inflation of the continental dollar. So they put in the Constitution, you can't use anything except gold and silver as legal tender, and you can't print money. Matter of fact, in 1792, when they wrote the first Coinage Act, they said that anybody who committed counterfeit, that they would get the death penalty. That's how serious they thought it was. But there's been a lot of counterfeiting going on lately, so I don't know whether we'll ever get around to invoking the death penalty. But the one thing is, we have a terrible situation now. If you as an individual American believe that the old silver coins and gold coins and the Constitution is right, and you use that money, you can be arrested. You can be arrested and your money confiscated, and they can say you're a terrorist and that you're counterfeiting by using authentic money. But what do we do with the real counterfeiters? We leave them alone. Why is that so important? Well, if you're against big government, you have to understand the monetary issue, because big government grows for a couple reasons. There's a group up in Washington that loves to spend endless money on militarism, that we have to be in every country in the world. We are now in 135 countries. We have 900 bases overseas. It's not defending our country. It's weakening our country. We have less security for it. We need to bring a bunch of those troops home.
We now promote preemptive war. I do not believe that's part of the American tradition. We in the past have always declared war in the defense of our liberties or go to aid somebody. But now we have accepted the principle of preemptive war. We have rejected the just war theory of Christianity. And now, tonight, we hear that we're not even willing to remove from the table a preemptive nuclear strike against the country that has done no harm to us directly and is no threat to our national security. I mean, we have to come to our senses about this issue of war and preemption and go back to traditions and our Constitution and defend our liberties and defend our rights, but not to think that we can change the world by force of arms and to start wars.
Congressman Paul, I believe you are the only man on the stage who opposes the war in Iraq, who would bring the troops home as quickly as almost immediately, sir. Are you out of step with your party? Is your party out of step with the rest of the world? If either of those is the case, why are you seeking its nomination?
Well, I think the party has lost its way because the conservative wing of the Republican Party always advocated a non-interventionist foreign policy. Senator Robert Taft didn't want to be in NATO. George Bush won the election in year 2000 campaigning on a humble foreign policy, no nation building, no policing of the world. Republicans were elected to end the Korean War. The Republicans were elected to end the Vietnam War. There's a strong tradition of being anti-war in the Republican Party. It is the constitutional position. It is the advice of the founders to follow a non-interventionist foreign policy. Stay out of entangling alliances. Be friends with countries. Negotiate and talk with them and trade with them. Just think of the tremendous improvement relationships with Vietnam. We lost 60,000 men. We came home in defeat. Now we go over there and invest in Vietnam. So there's a lot of merit to the advice of the founders and following the Constitution. And my argument is that we shouldn't go to war so carelessly. When we do, the wars don't end.
Congressman, you don't think that changed with the 9/11 attack, sir?
What changed?
The non-interventionist policies.
No, non-intervention was a major contributing factor. Have you ever read about the reasons they attacked us? They attack us because we've been over there. We've been bombing Iraq for 10 years. We've been in the Middle East. I think Reagan was right. We don't understand the irrationality of Middle Eastern politics. So right now we're building an embassy in Iraq that's bigger than the Vatican. We're building 14 permanent bases. What would we say here if China was doing this in our country or in the Gulf of Mexico? We would be objecting. We need to look at what we do from the perspective of what would happen if somebody else did it to us.
Are you suggesting we invited the 9/11 attack, sir?
I'm suggesting that we listen to the people who attacked us and the reason they did it. And they are delighted that we're over there because Osama bin Laden has said, I am glad you're over on our sand because we can target you so much easier. They have already now, since that time, have killed 3,400 of our men, and I don't think it was necessary.
Wendell, may I make a comment on that? That's really an extraordinary statement. It's an extraordinary statement as someone who lived through the attack of September 11, that we invited the attack because we were attacking Iraq. I don't think I've ever heard that before, and I've heard some pretty absurd explanations for September 11. And I would ask the congressman to withdraw that comment and tell us that he didn't really mean that.
Congressman?
I believe very sincerely that the CIA is correct when they teach and talk about blowback. When we went into Iran in 1953 and installed the Shah, yes, there was blowback. The reaction to that was the taking of our hostages, and that persists. And if we ignore that at our own risk. That if we think that we can do what we want around the world and not incite hatred, then we have a problem. They don't come here to attack us because we're rich and we're free. They come and they attack us because we're over there. I mean, what would we think if we were, if other foreign countries were doing that to us?
Can I have 30 seconds, please?
No, wait a second. We'll all get 30 seconds.
Congressman Paul, I've heard him now in many debates talking about bringing our troops home and about the war in Iraq and how it's failed. And I want to tell you that that kind of isolationism, sir, is what caused World War II. Allow him his answer, please. We allowed Hitler to come to power with that kind of attitude of isolationism and appeasement.
Okay.
And I want to tell you something, sir. I just finished having Thanksgiving with the troops, and their message to you is, the message of these brave men and women who are serving over there is, let us win. Let us win.
Right.
That's what they want.
Do you have to allow Congressman Paul 30 seconds to respond?
Absolutely. The real question you have to ask is, why do I get the most money from active duty officers, military personnel? So what John is saying is just
totally distorted. He doesn't even understand the difference between non-intervention and isolationism. I'm not an isolationist. I want to trade with people, talk with people, travel, but I don't want to send our troops overseas using force to tell them how to live. We would object to it here, and they're going to object to us over there.
All right.
Let me ask you a couple things about foreign policy. Iraq. You don't actually believe that troops will ultimately come out of Iraq, do you?
Oh, no, I don't. We'll change their names. I mean, we're going to have, they've already admitted there'll be 15,000, but, you know, they've morphed the private sector with the military. The CIA and contractors, it's a mixture, but there's going to be 15,000 in the armed camp, you know, the fortress, the embassy, the biggest embassy in the world. Al-Sadr, who is the champion of national sovereignty for Iraq, he says that is still occupation, and occupation is the key word for why we should look out. There's a civil war going on in northern Iraq. The Turks have already put troops into Iraq. Turks are now allying with the Iranians because there's civil strife up there. That is a consequence. The Christians have been run out of Iraq. And ironically, there were no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They're there now. So there's nothing but chaos. We are going to have a military presence there, undoubtedly.
Do you believe that the United States has a moral responsibility to deal with humanitarian crisis anywhere in the world?
No, only voluntarily. We don't have authority in the Constitution to get involved in internal affairs or getting involved in entangling alliances. The Constitution doesn't give you the authority. They get us into more trouble. They undermine our national defense, and they cause a lot of trouble. If you want to do it voluntarily and get involved, you can volunteer and go over there and send your money. But I don't, as a president, have the authority to go. If our national security is threatened, then you do it properly. This president now has gone in there on his own. He has flaunted the responsibility to go to the Congress. He doesn't get permission. And we went over, that wouldn't have happened without our money and our drones and our missiles and all, and it happened. So we're responsible for the chaos.
Congressman Paul, you say that President Obama is not too soft on Iran. You say that he is too tough on Iran. I want to put up some of your statements. Sanctions are not diplomacy, you say. They are a precursor to war and an embarrassment to a country that pays lip service to free trade. As for Iran's nuclear ambitions, you wrote this: one can understand why they might want to become nuclear capable, if only to defend themselves and to be treated more respectfully. Is that your policy towards Iran?
Well, even our own CIA gives me this information that they have no evidence that they're working on a weapon. Just think of what we went through in the Cold War when I was in the Air Force, after I was drafted in the Air Force, all through the 60s. We were standing up against the Soviets. They had like 30,000 nuclear weapons with intercontinental missiles. Just think of the agitation and the worrying of a country that might get a nuclear weapon someday, and just think of how many nuclear weapons surround Iran. The Chinese are there, the Indians are there, the Pakistanis are there, the Israelis are there, the United States is there, all these countries. China has nuclear weapons. Why wouldn't it be natural that they might want a weapon? There'd be, internationally, they'd be given more respect. Why should we write people off? There was, you know, in the 50s, we at least talked to them. At least our leaders and Reagan talked to the Soviets. What's so terribly bad about this? And people, countries that you put sanctions on, you are more likely to fight them. I say a policy of peace is free trade, stay out of their internal business, don't get involved in these wars, and just bring our troops home.